Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUReview.com and on your favorite podcast app. Welcome to my world.
Oh no! You wanna fight, Drake? Wait, you there?
Go ahead. You're pretty strong for some clown who thinks he's Batman.
I am Batman.
Let's go. Remember, there might be some momentary discomfort.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 146 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me is my good friend, good brother, and the gentleman that runs our Twitter page. It is Liam. Liam, welcome to episode 146 of the DCAU Review.
That's right, and as we continue on reviewing Batman Beyond all February long, we have come to yet another episode that I had almost no memory of.
Same here.
So that being, of course, Armory. As we'll get into, it has some. It's another episode that focuses more on Terry's high school friends and sort of the characters connected to the Hamilton Hill High side of things.
Yeah, I'm wondering why some of these episodes, like, maybe we just... I know there was a period, we've talked about it before, where you weren't really allowed to watch Batman Beyond because of, like, there were some episodes that scared you.
Yes.
I guess maybe we didn't watch reruns as much. I'm curious as to why these episodes, this week and last week, are episodes that were not in... They either weren't in heavy rotation, or we just didn't see them a whole bunch. Didn't have them recorded on videotape, and they weren't in the heavy rotation on Saturday mornings for Kids WB. So, and I guess we didn't watch them a whole bunch even after getting the DVDs. So it's almost like we're getting new Batman content here at times.
A little bit, yeah. It's a lot of this. It's like, yeah, I vaguely, when I read the synopsis of the plot, I was like, yeah, I vaguely remember. I probably watched this once, as you said, like when we got the DVDs,
right?
But yeah, another one that hadn't made a great lasting impression. Which, as we've talked about in the past, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. You don't have the nostalgia goggles the way we might for certain episodes of the original Batman the Animated Series, or even Superman. But on the other hand, it also means that you might be perhaps willing to be a bit more critical of it because you don't have that sort of that nostalgia for it. So interested to see what side of the fence we fall on this week.
For sure, absolutely. So as you mentioned, the episode Armory is the episode that we are covering today. This episode originally debuted back on March the 11th, 2000. Well, at least according to the DCAU wiki page. So before we get kicked off here to do that and discussing the plot, the animation, visuals, music, and voice acting, Liam, I'm going to throw it over to you to provide us with the official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode.
All right, and this is for the episode Armory, which is written by John McCann, directed by Kyung-Won Lim, with music by Christopher Carter, and animation by Coco/Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. To support his family, a desperately unemployed advanced weapons engineer must steal vital materials for an illegal arms deal, and elude Batman to do it.
All right. That tacked on and elude Batman makes it a little wordy. Not exactly a fan of the way that they worded that, but
a lot of syllables in that. Desperately unemployed advanced weapons engineer is a mouthful to get out, but I did it here, folks.
You did it. Like, you're a professional. We love it. All right, Liam, so let's jump into the plot then. We actually have the return of a character here, that a minor character, actually, that was featured in a prior Batman Beyond episode as sort of like an ancillary, easily forgotten character.
Yeah, so we have this character, Jared, who... the episode opens, we are at his birthday party, and he is being gifted a nice new car by his mother and his stepfather.
It's amazing how many friends you can buy with a rich stepfather.
Is it possible that we're just a teeny bit jealous?
Maybe.
Talk. Let's dance.
You sure don't do anything halfway, Big Jim. There's no reason the Tate family shouldn't have the best. And as long as I'm around, that's what it's gonna have.
And there's sort of a brief interaction of Terry, Max, and Dana sort of remarking on how nice it must be to be able to afford all these lavish gifts, and wouldn't you know it, the rest of the episode from there, it's like we go from this stepfather, Big Jim, slash the villain of the piece, Armory. Like, it's his story for the rest of the episode. Like,
he's heavily featured.
Batman just kind of shows up a few times, like,
which we've talked about in the past. That sometimes can be a good storytelling device, because Batman not being featured, or it's not about Batman, or not wholly about Batman trying to figure out who the villain is or his motivation. You really get to kind of empathize a little bit with the motivation of the character, because obviously we learn here at the beginning that Big Jim, as he's known, he lives a lavish lifestyle. We previously saw him in Spellbound, I believe, where he was getting married to Jared's mother, and their wedding was unfortunately ruined by Spellbinder. I think the sequence is that he uses the Spellbinder gimmick to have her to, like, throw away her jewelry or whatever it is.
Yes,
she thinks it turns into insects.
Creepy giant bug sequence of that episode.
There you go. One of the episodes that ultimately led to you getting banned from watching this. Anyway, so we have this character returning. So again, it's not a character that was necessarily featured, but at least did make a previous appearance. So he lives a lavish lifestyle. He's gifting his stepson this expensive car, and Max is certainly jealous, and it mentions that in the very next scene we learn that he's being laid off from Wayne Powers, courtesy of Paxton Powers, doing some reorganization. Of course, it's alluded to, and certainly Big Jim seems to insinuate that he thinks it's because corporate greed is at play here.
Laid off?
Paxton Powers wants to move the light weapons division into new areas.
You mean he wants to dump me and hire someone else at a lower salary?
I won't dignify that with an answer. Due to recent market reversals, your severance package, alas, will be modest.
I built that division up from nothing. I was in special forces. I've got degrees in electronics and engineering. They'll have to hire 2 people to replace me.
Take it easy, Jim.
Look, Karen, I just got married. I'm remodeling the house. I've got alimony. Things are tight. I mean, you started out as my assistant. Put in a word for me. Let me outsource as a consultant until I can find something else.
There's nothing I can do.
Yeah, that's, we don't get too many episodes. We talked about this that focus on Paxton Powers. We talked about sort of the repositioning of the show to focus much more on the high school side of Terry with the second season, certainly. That sort of carries on. So this is kind of one of our first mentions of Paxton still sort of being, I guess, a figurehead at Wayne Powers, despite the fact that I think in another episode it was said that Bruce was back to sort of take a more active role in the company after Derek Powers was
He must
ousted.
Still be on the board, regardless.
Yeah, but so I guess he still has some sort of position of power with the company, and has made the decision to cut Jim from his job. And Jim kind of begs and pleads. We get a little montage of him going on various job interviews, and him telling his family, it's going to be fine. I've got all these different skills. They mentioned he was in the special forces, that he was this incredible, weapons designer. He's an engineer. He's a scientist. So he's like, of course, I'll get another job again in no time. And he keeps getting no's, or can you hold on, or we don't have anything for you right now type responses, and begins to get more desperate as he wants to continue to provide this sort of lavish lifestyle for his wife and his stepson.
We kind of get also that while he's out on this job search, he's trying to do the sort of classic, like, hide this from your family thing.
Yeah.
Like, he has to be the man of the family and not show that he's terrified of what's, not having a job. He has to be strong and prototypical male of the household and not show
Right.
weakness, and also still allow for his wife, who they keep talking about these different upgrades and construction that's happening on their household that just seem to be very lavish. So
Yes.
he's in some way feeling the pressure that he can't say no to this woman that he loves, or to really let her know that maybe this isn't something that he can continue in, or he wants to continue to have this lavish lifestyle, and maybe there's no real motivation for it, but maybe it's motivation of losing them, or that they're not going to see him as the person he was.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of ties his identity to this lavish, rich lifestyle that he's provided for his wife and stepson.
Yeah, and that's kind of touched upon, I think, towards the end of the episode when Jared and his mom sort of find out that Jim is this new supervillain Armory, and that he has been stealing all of these products to make this big sonic drill for this shady arms dealer named the tremendously named Istvan Hegadesh from some unnamed country.
Put some respect on his name.
That's right. It's a heck of a name. Very fun to say.
Istvan.
Istvan.
What can I say, Jim? These cutbacks affect everyone. Force Tech can't afford to bring you on board.
Force Tech has a short memory, Istvan. I've helped you guys out before, under the table.
And we paid you generously. Of course, there are certain unofficial job opportunities.
Like what?
You once mentioned a sonic wave device that could shatter steel, the perfect anti-tank weapon.
I designed it, but Wayne Powers passed on a prototype.
Force Tech has contacts with a certain foreign government that is, temporarily in disfavor with the world community. If you were to build them a prototype, they would be embarrassingly grateful.
It's not that easy. I'd have to steal the specifications and build the thing from scratch.
I understand, Jim. If it's too much, you can always go live on your modest severance package. But our client won't wait, and neither will I. I need an answer now.
But but there's sort of a mention of Jim going like, well, I was just afraid I was going to lose everything, so I worked with this guy to steal these parts, and his wife and Lorraine and Jared both kind of not lecture him necessarily, but tell him like, of course we would have stood by you during all this. Of course you didn't, we didn't only love you because you were providing us with these creature comforts, these physical things. So it's but it's definitely that sort of classic archetype of the head of the household loses his income and is determined to keep everything as normal and moving along as normally as possible for his family, even if he has to do some sort of uncouth things to keep the cash rolling in.
Absolutely,
and that's sort of the path that he's taken on here. Is he is tasked by Mr. Istvan Hegadesh to track down these different parts to build this giant sonic drill, which, as mentioned, could be a prototype anti-tank weapon, not unlike a sonic drill we may have seen in like a few other episodes, including Off Balance, which you can check out our review of that episode with the episode's director, Kevin Altieri, back in the archives at DCAUreview.com. But and as we mentioned, it's mostly that is the story of Jim sort of planning these heists and then sort of worrying that he's going to get caught, and sort of dealing with the guilt and not letting his family in, and then Terry sort of is kind of, as we said, kind of a background player there. Both sort of heists that Armory is involved in, Batman shows up to fight, and they have fisticuffs, which we will certainly get more to in I think in visuals. And then Terry is able to kind of piece things together thanks to a sort of one-off conversation. He and Max run into Jared at a CD store, Cal. Those things that definitely still exist.
50 years in the future from now, whenever now is, but there's still... I speculated it could easily be explained away as, just as there are vinyl stores now that people probably, 20 years ago didn't assume there would be, Now there are places that you can buy vinyl in Walmart and Target. So it's not as if it's too far-fetched to think that maybe CDs would have a revolution in 50 years from now
why
or
not?
something. Sure,
I think that's fine. Yeah.
We've seen the revolution and the people bringing back cassette tapes and
That's
that being a thing that the kiddos are doing. So. Who's to say that CD stores couldn't make a comeback in 50 years?
Absolutely. There's just no reason to assume otherwise, and definitely not because the show was made in 1999.
Exactly, and they never thought to think that technology would advance beyond physical copies or libraries. But yeah, so the majority of the episode is Big Jim trying to balance this, pursuit of this technology. He is able to successfully steal items from Wayne Powers, and then he realizes he needs an additional part. There's a pursuit that happens both involving the police and Batman that he's able to successfully escape from. Batman, or Terry rather, is able to track him to the next place that he attempts to steal technology from, and does successfully. There's another battle between the two of them, and then Terry eventually Batman eventually arrives back at Big Jim's house, and that's sort of where everything culminates. As Estevan is there with Big Jim, and in the meantime, Jared has gone snooping around his stepfather's dresser and found the security code. Mm-hmm. Just happened to be written on the back of his dresser drawer, and uses it to break into his father's workshop when he isn't home. And then Estevan and Big Jim arrive shortly thereafter. Jared is, of course, outed from his hiding space by a rogue spider that just happens to be crawling around. And then Batman arrives quickly thereafter. They see him with a security camera. And then Estevan takes hold of the aforementioned sonic drill, starts using it as a weapon, and really has Batman right where he wants him, right in the crosshair, is about to do away with him. And Big Jim steps up and uses one of the weapons that he had previously used against Batman, the sort of freeze. It's sort of like a freeze gun in a way. Mm-hmm. It creates an ice block or something around Estevan's hand, so he stops him from killing Batman. Estevan turns his attention to Big Jim to try and take him out at that point, and Batman saves Big Jim. So we get a final scene with Terry and Jared and Max walking through the hills of the halls of Hamilton Hill High. Easy for me to say. And we learn that Big Jim, he was cooperative with the investigation, and the judge was lenient in his sentencing, but it is implied that he went to some sort of jail or won't be home for some time.
So the judge was lenient. I'm glad.
My dad cooperated in every way. Of course, he won't be home for a while, and there's that fine.
Yeah, I heard you lost a car.
You meet more interesting people on public transportation.
Hey, I got my sister's car while she's away. Anytime you need a ride, I'm there, Jared.
You never made that offer to me.
Maybe you're spoiled.
So not only does he pay with time lost and being in prison, but he ultimately has to pay more money in the end anyway. But that's sort of the resolution here. Crime doesn't pay, as the old adage goes, I guess. So
yeah, this is definitely one of those stories where most of the problems could have been solved if these people had one conversation,
right?
And again, this is a trope not exclusive to Batman Beyond or cartoons or superhero stories in general. This type of story is very, very much something that is just a trope that has existed, as you mentioned, for a long time. Yeah. But it's if you have one honest conversation with his wife, none of this happens.
But here's the thing: I don't think no disagreement alarm, but I'm going to say based on I can think about things that I have done that a simple conversation probably could have solved them as well. And there's just that human aspect sometimes of thinking this is the only option I have, and I'm going to do this, and this may seem dangerous or unlawful, and I'm not saying I've done unlawful things. I'm just saying your brain goes to that. Well, this might not be the right thing to do in this case, but this seems like the best and easiest way for this problem to be solved. So I'm going to do this. So I can relate to him in that way, and thinking that you're you're taking a shortcut. It's like, all right, well, doing this, having a conversation with my wife and her stepson about like, hey, I'm not going to have enough money to make you happy, so I'm going to do this ridiculous plot. Yeah, while it is certainly like taking that and blowing it out of proportion and being like, oh, to this magnitude of becoming a supervillain and robbing big tech companies to build a weapon for a foreign government.
Right.
I as a human, I can track the thought of this seems like a small problem to somebody outside, but if you're not in the situation, you're going to sometimes you do crazy things thinking that that's going to solve the problem, and you just wind up in a bigger mess because of it. With that said, becoming a supervillain is a little bit out there.
Yeah.
And that's where the trope comes in. It's like, all right, well, did this person need to use this to go this far to become to start robbing multiple big tech companies and trying to kill Batman and working with foreign governments to build high-tech weapons that are going to be used possibly in traitorous actions?
Yeah, we went 0 to treason real quick.
Right, exactly.
But no, that's a fair assessment though, is that sometimes your own pride and, like you said, the sort of old school feeling of I'm the man, I'm the father, I've got to be the one providing, and I can't ask my son to return his car or the wife to not go ahead with these remodeling plans that she has. I just gotta get that money however I can. Like I said, it is. I maintain that I think it is very over the top because of the lengths it goes through in a superhero story. But you're right. It's certainly not a completely outlandish motivation.
I was going to say the only thing that I could think about is like true crime stories where spouses like kill the other spouse for insurance money to pay off debts or whatever, or like to avoid, well, I don't want to have to pay this person alimony, so I'm just going to kill them. It's like, how does one's brain go to that motivation, or like this is going to be a thing, and not think about the consequences, or think that this is the best easiest thing for you. You're going to be able to do this. This is a little bit in that same vein of, well, I'm going to just be a supervillain for a little bit, and then everything's going to be okay. He even in his explanation to his family, Big Jim ends up saying like, this was just a stopgap. This is just something that I needed to hold us over until I got my next job. That was all that it was supposed to be, and it ended up getting out of control. So I can in some way track, but it is a little ridiculous. I'll say that.
That's fair, and that's fair. I think we can get into our scores here. Overall, like I said, I don't dislike this episode at all. But I just thought it was a little outlandish for my taste, and I think maybe just the lack of focusing on Batman. Not that anyone involved in the story, either from the writer's perspective or from certainly when we get into voice acting perspective, did a bad job when it comes to the Jim Tate / Armory storyline. But it's just, it's not a character we know anything about or like have a lot of a reason to be emotionally invested in. Again, sort of what we talked about with the Last Resort episode of focus, and the high school friend in this case, who also isn't really even the main focus. It's the high school friend's dad.
Right.
Is also a character, like you said, we've seen one other time, and maybe he's in the background of a few other scenes, but it's not like this is Max's dad or Dana's dad or somebody that like we actually have some emotional investment in. Right. So. Yeah, I ended up settling on a 6 out of 10. I don't like I said, I don't dislike it. I think it's a solid, easy to watch time, but it's just it's I don't know. I just didn't feel super invested in the characters.
Yeah, I went with the same exact score, 6 out of 10. I think that the plot itself, again, it's not an original story either. So it's it's one that again we're familiar with the trope. So if you had used a character that was a little bit more. It made more of an impact to you that they made this decision. Maybe this would be an episode, and Batman Beyond didn't really do this, but a two-parter sometimes allowed you to kind of build in some of that emotional connection with brand new characters.
Absolutely.
Some of the best episodes of Batman the Animated Series were able to do that. So Two-Face, obviously Harvey Dent had been a character prior to that episode, but that really laid the groundwork for having an emotional connection with that character and his ultimate sort of turn to villainy afterwards really has a higher impact because you get to learn and sort of emotionally connect with this character that was struggling with his mental illness, or even Feet of Clay, where you have this character of Matt Hagen who you didn't know who it was, but you quickly sort of have an emotional connection with this guy because you realize he's sort of, it's more of an addiction type thing. So there's time for an emotional connection to be built in that, where he starts out and you kind of have a little bit of that with him getting rejected from his job applications, and again the allusion to sort of the corporate greed factor of downsizing. But it's very rapid fire, very rapid, quickly, and as you said, he goes 0 to treason very quickly. In that, suddenly he's at a table with this guy and he's agreeing to build a weapon for a foreign government. It's like, all right, well, we didn't have a lot of time here to build to that. So maybe if this had been a two-parter, it crescendos sort of with that initial battle between, crescendos with him coming to terms with this, okay, well, I don't have a choice. Maybe he even struggles with that decision at first, going back and forth, and he realizes, he goes back home and has a conversation with his wife, and maybe because she's not aware of the monetary worries that he has, she continues to put pressure on him about getting the house done, and he feels like he has no choice but to pursue this helping out this foreign government. So if that crescendoed at that point, you have a battle with Batman, he escapes, and then the second part is him coming to terms with the realization that he's kind of full on supervillain at this point, and it maybe feels like he's beyond redemption or what have you, or coming to terms with the weight of realizing what he's done as it comes crashing down. Maybe that could have been a little bit more impactful.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. It is, after all, only 22 minutes, so we kind of have to, as we said, kind of jump right from the little birthday party scene to him losing his job to him kind of getting so desperate he'll make this deal and all of that, and then we got to work in our action beats because it's a Batman cartoon,
right?
So.
You're going to jail. Easy or hard, it's up to you. Here's a tip. Hard isn't fun.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Liam. Well, let's move on to animation and visuals. Coco Dong-Yang in charge of this episode once again. And man, I think visual and animation was the strongest thing for me for this episode overall. What did you like about the animation and visuals?
Yeah, I think the most interesting part is definitely just all of the varying gadgets that Armory uses in his various fights with Batman and the police. First thing we see is like this grenade that creates like a solid holographic wall that that a couple cop cars crash into and then sort of fades away.
It's the old wall in a box.
That old trick. It reminds me a lot of the different like intergang weapons that we see in Superman.
Sure.
Certainly in Tools of the Trade. So it's just kind of like what if he had a gun or a grenade or a weapon that could do that? And
right.
Yeah, that would look cool. Let's do it.
And they lay the groundwork that he's a weapons designer. Mm-hmm, he's the top weapons designer, working for Wayne Powers, and as you mentioned, worked in special forces. So he has a background. So while it may be a little bit like, all right, we just need this for the plot, so we're going to have him do this, there's at least an explanation early on in the episode that he has a history of kind of creating some of these prototypes, maybe.
For sure, yeah. I think there's it's like a combination like taser and like bola or something that like it shoots out, has like little tendrils that wrap around Batman before it electrifies him, and that was clever. We get a cool like POV shot a few times actually throughout this episode as we get the view from inside the cowl, sort of all in red, and we have this sort of like static effect go across the the visor that we can see.
One of those cuts to commercial, actually, right?
Yes.
Which is I thought was a good transition as well.
Yeah, agreed. And yes, so I definitely think that the different Armory weapons, including his color changing and perhaps self-repairing truck that he escapes in. So definitely, I think Armory and his various his wonderful toys are definitely the most fun on display here.
Yeah, they had a lot. I think they had a lot of fun with that. We already mentioned also he had a freeze type gun that he used multiple times that kind of sticks Batman to a wall and then is later used to save Batman from Istvan. We did mention, of course, the sonic drill that's put into play later on. That works very similarly, it seems, to the aforementioned sonic drill from Off Balance that they used in that one. So interesting that they went back to that well with that type of weapon. I also had noted the different viewpoints from anytime you get the visual from inside Batman's cowl, I think is a unique. They don't overuse it either, so that when it does show up in the series, I feel like it's very effective. I thought that let's see, what else did I have here? There's in the initial battle between Batman and Armory, there's a Batman gets kind of knocked on his butt, and as Armory's driving his big SUV or Hummer or whatever it is at Batman's sitting behind this generator or something and uses the rockets in his boots to launch the projectile at the car, which I thought was a pretty ingenious way to use. Usually we see them used when Batman's flying, certainly to add a quick escape if he needs it, but for him to use it to sort of weaponize it to launch a projectile, I thought that was unique. We do get to see Terry on his motorcycle again.
That's right.
So that makes an appearance. There's even a cool little hand thing, that handprint scanner used to open up a little area on the bike that has the bat suit inside. I thought that was cool. Terry also goes low tech in this episode, using the original Batarang and rope. Well, the new Batman Adventures Batarang and rope. We see him use that after Armory uses a what do they call those?
EMP.
EMP. That's right.
It's like, but it's not like it's not like a bomb. It's like a gun. So Armory uses it on a riding cop car, one of the whatever you call the floating cop vehicles.
Not a blimp.
Not a blimp. It's not a helicopter.
It's like whatever that advanced flying vehicle is.
That's right. Whatever those are called. He shoots one of those and it kind of crashes down and goes into these barrels of oil or whatever it's supposed to be. That ends up catching on fire. Creates this big explosion.
Yeah.
And then he shoots the bat suit with it. So Terry needs a quick escape, and I guess the rocket thrusters aren't firing. So he, or the wings won't retract or whatever. So he throws out the old school Batarang on a rope, and it's just kind of hanging on a light post. I thought that was a clever little bit that would be something that he and Bruce would have prepared for at some point.
Yeah.
By this point in the series, that it is possible that someone could damage the suit where he wouldn't have his regular arsenal at his disposal.
Yeah.
And would keep a few of the old gadgets with him as well, just in case. So I liked that. That bit there when the fire and explosion is happening and the cops are kind of all running away from it, and Terry drives this big giant dump truck looking thing that has a bunch of sand in it, and turns in, it's smashing against the walls of this warehouse where they are, and then he turns it and it falls over on its side, and all the sand dumps out onto the fire to kind of contain it. I thought that was a really clever and cool visual deal there. And then the final fight it's brief. It's Terry shows up at the shed as Jim and his family are kind of having this heart to heart, and Haggadesh takes the drill when they see Batman there, because once again Terry forgot that he can be invisible, and and so he starts getting shot at by this sonic cannon.
Maybe he should write that on his hand, like the hand of the suit. Like,
it's like a reminder.
Can turn invisible.
Like a little sticky note in the Batmobile when he's about to get out. By the way, you can turn invisible whenever you want. And then as you mentioned, Big Jim kind of saves the day there, and Batman is able to capture Haggadah, and we get our happy ending. But yeah, I think overall visuals definitely the strongest part of the episode, and I settled on an 8 out of 10 for visuals.
Nice. I went just a tick higher. I went 9 out of 10. I think that for the most part, I think that certainly the fun is had in everything that we listed there. There's a lot of action in this episode, which, unlike last week's episode, we talked about maybe plot not being so strong. This week, plot, neither of us gave plot super high scores, but making up for it as far as the action is concerned, the visuals, keeps you entertained, doesn't feel like it's dragging at times, and keeps you interested, even if the plot itself is like, this isn't so great. But the actual visuals themselves. I think Armory's costume also, I didn't mention that, but Armory's costume itself, he's just wearing a sort of a black hood with sort of this very militaristic type. You mentioned sort of getting a lockup type feeling to it, or maybe the same tailor that Mad Stan goes to. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But either way, he's got he's just sort of wearing a tactical vest and a hood. But very the design is very effective. He's got the classic white eyes of that you find on the Batman cowl or a lot of other villain cowls, and works very well. I think that the visuals are very strong for this episode, and certainly is reflected in the scores that we gave.
For sure.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music for this week. Who did our music for this week, and what were your notes?
Yeah, it was, once again, it was Christopher Carter doing the music this week, and it's funny, we talk about a lot of the time the action music kind of fades into the background, but I actually thought, especially in the first chase scene, that the action music, it's very drum and guitar based, but I thought it actually stood out. I think because there's not much dialogue. It's just Batman chasing Armory and nobody's really talking, so I think
they don't have verbal spats back and forth or anything like that.
There's no quipping in this one, so there's you can kind of notice the music even in the action beats, I think a little more clear. I think as well in the final fight outside of the shed, there's like a really kind of cool bass line that's going through the music, the action music in that final scene, in that final battle as well. So I think the action music, as much as in a lot of episodes we kind of note that it falls into the background behind the sound effects and the dialogue and everything, because these scenes don't have much of the dialogue. I think you could actually kind of pick up on just how driving the music really has to kind of take more of a front seat to drive the action, because you don't have a lot of acting and reacting going on.
No, I agree with that. There's multiple chase scenes that happen in this episode, so that's always something to me that is sort of make or break by the music that accompanies it, and it seems to me the shows in the DCAU do a really good job of always having some sort of music that adds to the scene and doesn't detract from it. So they continued that here. I agree with you. I think that bass line that sort of runs, it may be running through a synth, or it might be just a synthesizer used as the bass line. I noticed it in that final scene. I also noticed it in the prior scene with the fire that we talked about, and the battle between Armory and Batman there. So having a theme, while it's not a dynamic theme that stands out like you would say a typical supervillain theme would, there's a theme that runs through and plays multiple times. That's always something that's appreciated and you can pick up on. It's like, okay, so this is this adversary's theme, and it changed up a little bit throughout there. And then we get at the end of that culmination of that final battle, you get the Batman Beyond theme played in a little bit of a different way. It's played, I think, with straight synth, as opposed to your typical guitar. So that was appreciated. Different sound there. Nothing like stood out completely and was like, yeah, what a great punctuation, or what a great, that was a great whatever. As far as the music is, when we usually typically give it a higher score. But with that said, I gave it a 7 out of 10, so it's higher compared to maybe the last couple of weeks that we've given scores for, and I think it does its job for this week's episode.
Yeah, and I went just a tick higher with an 8 out of 10. I genuinely think this is like I said, I think just because of the way the episode was structured, it needed to kind of do some more of the heavier lifting than it does in a lot of other Beyond episodes, and I think it did its job pretty well there, especially in the action scene. So yeah, very very job well done by Mr. Carter.
Perfect. All right, Liam, let's move on to our last category for this week, which, of course, will be voice acting. We have not a huge cast this week, but certainly some voices that we will recognize. One is in the conversation for going up on the Mount Rushmore of DCAU voices, just maybe for the sheer amount of voices that he's done. Another one is one that you might recognize from another universe's cartoon series, and then we have a couple of our returning cast members. So let's talk about this week's voice cast.
Yeah, we've got, as you said, not a huge cast here, but we have Vernie Watson as Lorraine, the Jared's mom and Jim's wife. Not much asked of her, but she does a solid job. And,
yeah, she's solid.
We have Omar Gooding returning as Jared, the younger brother of Cuba Gooding Jr.
Oh yeah,
as well. And yes, it is the same voice actor from his previous appearance. So he was
continuity.
Brought back here, so. You like to see that, and then you had, as mentioned, we have Corey Burton, one of the greatest, most prolific voice actors of all time, and here he is playing the again spectacularly named Esteban Higadesh.
Untraceable, tax-free, a small down payment.
Not bad. I still need to swipe a high-capacity circuit board.
You made quite an impression on the web. They're already calling you the human Armory.
You build this stuff, you test it, but you always wonder how it'll work when the pressure's on.
Are you satisfied?
It was like war.
It is a war, Jim. Every great conflict is centered around economic struggle. Your personal battle for financial security is no different.
Tell it to Batman. He almost got me.
You may have to take him out. After all, wars have their casualties.
He's got a little bit of an accent.
Yes, it's they don't say Kasnia this time, but usually when you have that sort of Eastern European accent going on, it's usually Kasnia is usually the country trying to do something they shouldn't be doing.
Of course.
So we
shadowy Eastern European.
Yes. But yeah, they don't actually name what country he's doing business on behalf of. But you can kind of piece it together, perhaps. But he does a solid job, and of course, as per usual, he also voices, I think, a couple of the cops, and I think one of the other guys that Jim is interviewing with to try to get a new job after he's fired. And
pretty sure it's mandatory if Corey Burton does any voice, he has to do at least 3 or 4 for the episode.
Yeah, of course. I think that's just
it's in his contract.
Yeah, that's the gift and curse of being such a versatile actor. I think is especially in a vocal. In a vocal medium, you're going to be asked to do a little extra heavy lifting than some of your other guest stars. But yes, and speaking of which, we have Lauren, Tom, and Cree Summer as Dana and Max once again. Terry is ignoring Dana, and Dana has to yell at him to come dance with her at a party. Just the worst. But no, they don't add or subtract much from the story. They're just kind of around in a couple of scenes. But and then yes, we have the returning. We've actually talked about him a couple times before, but Dorian Harewood as the voice of Armory / Jim Tate, who of course voiced a character in the episode The Forgotten, Batman the Animated Series, Riley, but He would be better known to, I think, other folks of other superhero animation as the voice of War Machine in the second season of the Iron Man cartoon, after he replaced Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince, who had done it in the first season. He took on that role from there. And
I would call Mr. Harewood #my War Machine. I'm just going to throw that out there.
He's definitely the one I remember more of. I think because that second season, at least visually, is such an improvement on the first one.
And he played War Machine in the Incredible Hulk appearance Iron Man made on the Incredible Hulk animated series, which we had like 1 or 2 episodes of that show on videotape and were in heavy rotation.
That's right.
So yeah, he's #my War Machine, but he does. I mean, for not having a lot of not having any dialogue as Armory, but he amazingly has the majority of the dialogue for this episode.
No question.
And he sort of has to carry that through this sort of emotional roller coaster that he goes through of being this sort of, like we already mentioned, the embarrassed patriarch of this family, feeling maybe emasculated because he doesn't have a job and can't provide for his family. So it's this balance of trying to... He's also increasingly getting irritated with his family and upset because he has to keep the secret from them. So...
Still no official comment from Wayne Powers regarding last week's break-in. However, sources state that Armory may have accessed top-secret research files.
I told those dummies to beef up security.
Jim, honey, Mr. Sweem wants to knock out that old rock fireplace and put in Italian marble. I wasn't sure I'd like it, but he faxed over these designs.
I don't care.
It's just that even discounted, the marble is going to be 20% above the bid, not including...
I don't care! I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap. Whatever you want, hon, I'm sure it'll look great. I think I'll get some work done out back. See you later.
I think he demonstrates great range from his performance in this episode.
Yeah, I agree. I think you kind of go through the different emotions where he's trying to keep on this brave face for his family in the first couple scenes after he loses his job, and then his sort of the desperation that begins to creep in, and as he's being turned down for job after job, and then finally going, well, this is, having this conversation with Estevan, and his playing off of Corey Burton, this kind of sleazy guy taking advantage of this kind of desperate family man in that case. I think that all works really well, and he has to do kind of a lot. And as you mentioned towards the end, when he's sort of pleading with the family, like, I was just going to do this to hold this over until I could get my real job back, or another respectable job. I was just doing some light treason until I could get there. But the way he's sort of pleading with it, and the way you see he has sort of justified it to himself, and like I said, while it may be sort of an over-the-top, borderline silly plot device, I think his performance elevates the material to an extent, and I think he did a very good job there.
Yeah, and then, of course, we have Will Friedle as Terry and Batman, who doesn't have a whole lot of dialogue here. Nope. He has a couple scenes, the scene at the CD store that we mentioned, and then sort of there's a wrap-up scene where they're back at Hamilton Hill, as we mentioned, where Max is talking with Jared and about having to give his car back after the events that have happened, and there's a minor joke played between Max and Terry, but not a whole lot from our main star of this week's episode.
No, not very much at all. And though he is credited, Kevin Conroy does not appear in this episode. Bruce Wayne does not appear in this episode. Kevin Conroy never appears because it's a cartoon. Bruce Wayne does not appear, so Kevin Conroy's voice is not heard.
Yeah.
Despite him being credited. So yeah, there isn't even, as we mentioned that in the action beats, you don't even have that little bit of like Terry talking to Bruce that we usually get in action scenes like that. So it definitely created a unique environment. But yeah, not a lot was asked of our guest cast, certainly, and especially of Mr. Harewood, and he did a very solid job with it. And I gave voice acting a very strong 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I gave it the same exact score, 8 out of 10.
How about that?
What do you know? Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's solid. Maybe a little bit of Kevin Conroy would have pushed that up a little bit. Having another strong, but having one strong actor and then everybody else just kind of being good. Yeah, sometimes that reflects in a not perfect or over the top score there for us. So
for sure.
All right, Liam. Well, that will lead us to our final scores for this week. Tallying everything up, I end up with a pretty respectable 30 out of 40. What about you?
And wouldn't you know it, Cal, I came up somehow, even though we had different scores for all but one category, we somehow still arrived at the same darn final score.
It's a rarity.
A 30 out of 40.
It's a rarity when we disagree by a wide margin, let alone at all. So.
That's right. So these are the occupational hazards of
us
reviewing
on
shows
other reviews, like I'd be curious to go back and look at like Siegfried and Roy, Roger Ebert's show, like Ebert and Roper, and check out how often they disagreed on things. Mm-hmm. If it's just like this is how we view things or personal taste or what have you. Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, it is a rarity that we disagree as far as final scores, or at least by wide margins. So if you're interested in hearing some of those, you can check them out in the archives at DCAUreview.com. Before we go on and wrap this episode up, Liam, let's talk about rewatchability for this episode. We already mentioned it's not an episode that was in heavy rotation or had a lasting impact on us necessarily from prior views. Doesn't feel like there's a whole large impact in the scope of things as far as Batman is concerned. Certainly not a whole lot that you learn or that moves or advances the plot of our characters or our main characters here. It does have a returning character from a prior episode. Where do you land as far as following up with this as a must watch or skip it?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about only the must-watch, I would say this is an easy skip.
Sure.
I don't think there's any... Like I said, I think it's an enjoyable enough episode. Certainly some fun action and some good voice performances. But nothing that happens here affects the main character of the series, that being Batman, or
Sure.
Terry McGinnis going forward, or even our other side characters like Max or Dana, and obviously Jared. I think this is his only other speaking appearance. I think he does appear in the background of a few other episodes, but he's not a character that becomes like a super important part of Terry's inner circle or anything. So yeah, like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with this episode. It's a fine way to spend 22 minutes if you have some time to kill, and it's not one you're like us, you maybe don't remember it. I think it's worth giving a watch. But as far as rewatching them, if you're trying to go back through and just see the cream of the crop, I think this one's a pretty easy skip.
Yeah, I guess it's hard sometimes when we break this down as like the criteria of rewatchability. This is an easy rewatch because there is a lot of action, I think, that happens. It's not a mystery episode. It's not mysterious as to who the identity of the Armory character is, so it's not like that gets spoiled. You learn that very quickly as to who the main antagonist is. So there's fun to be had. It's not a must-watch when it comes to the overall story of the DCAU. There's not even any advancement or lasting impact on the characters here. It doesn't seem Terry learns a lesson.
Right.
So it's not as if his character needed this story for anything. So if you're looking for fun episodes, yeah, this is one I would recommend. If you're looking for integral to the overall story, yeah, not necessarily this episode. As far as that's concerned, so
Agreed.
It's tough when we get into these sort of nuances of rewatchability. It's kind of hard. So we never really defined whether rewatchability. Sometimes it depends on the episode. It's rewatchable because it's integral to the story. Right. Sometimes it's rewatchable because it's fun. Sometimes it's because it's iconic.
Well, that's the thing. Like if someone who maybe was a newer fan was like, "Hey, show me, give me 3 episodes of Batman Beyond to
Sure.
watch so I can like get the gist of the series. This would not be on that.
That's
list.
fair. That's absolutely
so like
fair.
I would say like yeah, if you're already a fan of all these shows and you're already a fan of Batman Beyond, you can certainly rewatch this one and have a good time with it. But as far as like if you're trying to introduce it to a newer viewer or like I said, are trying to do like sort of an integral episodes rewatch, I wouldn't say it's certainly not a must watch, but certainly nothing wrong with popping this one back on for a rewatch in the future.
Agreed. All right, Liam, let's wrap up this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, check out the archives at DCAUreview.com. You can check out every episode that we've covered, including bonus episodes, things that we don't cover in our normal reviews here. Those are a lot of fun, including Batman The Adventures Continue, the comic book series, talking about different DCAU toys, DC Direct. We even talked about the Berlantiverse / Arrowverse.
It's the Arrowverse.
Yeah, it is the Arrowverse.
Gosh darn it.
Sorry, Captain Amell said it was the Berlantiverse, not me. Anyway, if you're interested in checking those out, go back in the archives at DCAUreview.com or on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you subscribe to us. If it allows you to leave a review, say, on an Apple Podcast, we would love for you to do so. That helps with the algorithm, helps get people to notice us as a podcast, gets more ears on it, and makes us motivated to do more things. Not that we're not motivated already. Speaking of motivated, if you are motivated to support the podcast, you can head over to DCAUreview.com, click on the store tab, check out our store, check out the merch that we have to support the pod. Grab a shirt, a hat, a mug, a sticker, something to your liking, and let us know. Tag us in a post if you get it. We would love to see that. We don't run ads here on the podcast, so that's the only type of ad that we run here. Is support the podcast by buying our merch if you like us.
Absolutely.
Liam, people can also follow us on social media at DCAU Review, both on Twitter and Instagram. You can even find us on Facebook if you look really, really hard, but we don't really talk about that because we're not big fans of that. But if you do follow us on Twitter, that's where where Liam likes to interact with people. We talk about the episodes we've done. We talk about upcoming episodes. We talk about themes. We do all that. Talk about even things that are happening in standard DC continuity in comics these days, or even DC films. Usually, though, on our Instagram and our Twitter, you can find clips and certainly previews for upcoming episodes. Liam, let us discuss the upcoming episode that we'll be covering on next week's episode of the DCAU Review.
That's right, and we will be wrapping up February with one last Batman Beyond review, that being the very next episode in the order that the Blu-rays provide us with, which I think actually might be air date order, by the way.
Okay.
Which is the inverse of the Batman the Animated Series and Superman DVDs, which go by production order.
Interesting.
So, but it appears we're going in air date. But that is the next episode in the order that the discs have told us, and that is the episode Sneak Peek, which is a sort of a strange tabloid.
I do remember this one.
Yeah, a tabloid man who seems to have this innate ability to get these incredible inside scoops, these very like paparazzi secret recordings of celebrities, and maybe even gets a shot of a certain non-caped crusader with his mask off.
Ooh.
Which might create some problems for our heroes. So definitely look forward to finishing out February with a pretty big and memorable episode.
Yeah, look forward to doing that. All right, Liam. And until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.